Good afternoon, Whale Coin Talk community. My name is Noah. I'm here today with Oasis Network, a privacy layer for Web3. Guys, welcome. Before we get started, do you want to give a quick background of yourselves, your career trajectory, your origin story, and how you found yourselves working in Web3?
Yeah, absolutely. Pleasure to be here, Noah. Thank you for having us, and happy to see everyone in the chat. I'm Will. I'm the Ecosystem Growth Manager at Oasis. I've been working at Oasis for about a year. Prior to that, I was an avid community member. I worked part-time as a BD ambassador for about 6 months prior to getting hired full-time at Oasis. Prior to that, I was an ambassador for the Oasis community for about a year. And yeah, just have been, I guess, really passionate about Web3 and recently like confidentiality and privacy in Web3 for, I got about 4 years now. So that's a bit about me and my history in blockchain.
Right on, Will. And I should have probably asked this. Are you going to be the only speaker today?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, I think so.
Okay, cool. Very interesting that you started out as a community member and then you ended up working for the protocol. I found that this seems to be a huge trend in Web3. A lot of people who have very important roles at different companies in the industry initially started out as a community member. So can you give us, and I know that we're not talking about the protocol yet, but I would love some more insight into what that was like, right? What your involvement as a community member was like, and then how you ultimately made that step over to being a team member.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I do notice the same trend. In fact, about 2 years ago, I was listening to a Twitter space about like how to land a job in Web3, and one of the speakers, who I'm now pretty good friends with, said basically that Web3 is backwards compared to like traditional like job recruiting, where like in traditional job you get the job, you provide value, then you like get paid, or you get like promotions and stuff like that. In Web3, it's sort of like you provide value first, demonstrate like your passion, your skills, then you get hired, and then you go on to like do your work. And I ever since they said that, that's the pattern that I see in Web3, and I think it's sort of because there's no degree, or there's no real way to like prove that you understand something, the technology, the protocol that you work for, anything like that, other than to just get involved. And really what it is like being involved in the community, seeing something that you can do, doing that task, the team will notice you, and then probably give you larger and larger tasks to do, until at some point it's like you're providing so much value, there's no reason to not hire you. So that's definitely like the trend that I see in Web3, and I would encourage anyone who wants to work in this industry to do something similar to that. Just find a community that you're really passionate about, and find ways to help and be engaged. And even if it doesn't get you a job with that protocol, other protocols and other projects will probably take notice of all the work that you're doing as well. For myself, basically, I got into, for me, what I consider like the blockchain crypto space a little bit late, 2017. So, I, I really at that point in time like thought like sort of smart contracts have been not solved, but like a lot of work had been done since Bitcoin had been created. And basically I was like, what technologies are necessary to get the space forward. And so one of the first ones I found was like oracles. I was like, that's what's going to be necessary to make more sophisticated smart contracts. You need off-chain data to be able to be used for smart contracts. And then after oracles, I found Oasis, and I found like confidential compute and privacy, and that's also I think extremely important to creating much more sophisticated smart contracts that can compete with their like traditional world counterparts. And yeah, just better user experiences overall.
Well, that's a perfect point to lead us into my next question. Will, can you give us a brief explanation of the Oasis network, how it works?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So the Oasis protocol is a layer one protocol focused mostly on privacy and scalability. So architecturally, it's very similar to now how ETH 2.0 has been like sort of has pivoted into like this direction, where we have a separation of consensus and execution. Often that's referred to as like a modular blockchain. So we have an underlying consensus chain, which handles which is, I guess, different than ETH 2.0, but it handles only governance, staking, transfers in the consensus layer, as well as validation of the execution layer. So it has no smart contract capabilities other than the governance smart contract. And then the execution layer is where all our smart contract execution is done. That's made up of parallel runtimes, which we call paratimes. Um, they're very similar to rollups on Ethereum. They're a bit different, but for all intents and purposes, people can think of them in that way. We have two main paratimes right now. We have Emerald, which is our 100% EVM compatible runtime. It's similar to any other EVM, Moonbeam, Akala, um, Polygon, all those. But I guess the advantage is that there's like 99% cheaper gas fees than Ethereum. It can handle a couple hundred transactions per second. It has instant finality and also inherits the decentralization because it submits proofs to the underlying consensus layer, which has a pretty large validator pool. And so that's Emerald. And I think the real reason that we're here today is to talk about Sapphire, which is our latest launch. Sapphire is our confidential EVM. So what that means is that Sapphire is able to um, create confidential smart contracts, which have the ability to hide aspects of state within the smart contract. That basically, is able to do confidential computing, which is what we see as very important for, Web3 to become competitive with traditional world, as confidential computing is, pretty much used in every application we use in our everyday life.
So, Will, let's take a step back for myself and audience members that aren't so familiar with confidential computing. Can you give us a high level breakdown of what that actually means?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I think in terms of the best way to describe it is computation where others can't see what's going on. So the best way I can normally describe it is with like a DEX. So um, if you imagine like your normal DEX or AMM, like when you're on a normal network, you can see everything that's going on, right? Like you can see the wallet address, you can see the token that they're selling, the token they're buying, the amount of tokens they're selling, the amount of tokens they're buying, the slippage that they occur in the trade, the order book of the DEX. So you can see the entire application. And that's just something inherent to transparent blockchains and EVMs. But with Sapphire, what's actually possible is that you could create a confidential DEX. So you could hide everything, which would mean like hiding like everything I just said, the wallet, the amount of tokens, which tokens, slippage, order book, all of that. But like maybe for regulatory reasons, things going on with Tornado Cash and stuff like that, like a confidential DEX is something that like people are weary of right now. But that's like not the only benefit. So for example, you could just hide specific parameters. You could hide just the slippage and the order book. And if you did that, you'd create like an MEV resistant DEX. And the reason why is that if you can't see the slippage and you can't see the order book, well, then the bots aren't able to accurately predict whether they're going to be profitable by front running you or doing these sandwich attacks because they don't have the necessary inputs. But on the user experience side, everything would look exactly the same. From their side, they would just see that they're like saving 1% on every trade they make, which at this point is added up to like $1 billion across all of Web3. And so this is what I normally mean when I say like um, more sophisticated smart contracts and better user experiences. I think in Web3, a lot of focus on privacy has had to do with like anonymous transactions versus like confidential computing. But I think there's like a lot of value in the confidential computing aspects where you can hide some of the state of the smart contract to create better user experiences.
So, That was a brilliant example with the decks. Wasn't even thinking of that. What are some other use cases as far as dApps go where this could become super handy?
Yeah. So there's like a few that like we see that are like, you know, um, we think are like sort of low hanging fruit. So gaming is like a is an obvious choice. So with gaming right now, right? Like if you look at most traditional, well, like most compelling games in the traditional world, they have like some aspect of hidden state or very confidential gaming logic, right? Something as simple as like a card game, you can't know what is in the other player's hand, and you can't know like what the state of the deck is. Like if you knew every what the order of the deck was, that would ruin the game as well. So that's like an aspect of confidential computing that you could bring on chain. In like a strategy game, there's often this idea of like fog of war. So like some aspect of the map that like either one player can't see or both players can't see, or like variable throughout the game where what can be seen and what can't be seen. And then like RPGs often have like puzzles, riddles, quests, these type of things where the solution is unknown. So the issue is that if you want to bring this on chain, right, like one, the smart contract itself would most likely give the answer to those puzzle, riddle, and quests. It would require that there be no fog of war, and there you would be able to see the state of the deck. So that's like one. But even like in the case where like somehow you were able to hide that, like as soon as like one transaction was sent and one, so imagine you have like a riddle to in an RPG game, like even if you were to hide the solution to that riddle, once a user it's a transaction submitting their own answer, then everyone could just copy that answer if it proved to be correct. So you need not just the smart contract, but also like the messages that you send to the smart contract to be able to be encrypted. And so the way that this is handled in Web3 today is that this is taken off chain by gaming projects. But when you take things off chain, well now you've lost sort of the special juice that makes like Web3 what it is, which is like high integrity and a trustless nature. And so this trade off has to be made. And what we're really excited about with Sapphire is that this trade no longer has to be made. That you can have both on-chain smart contracts while also incorporating confidentiality. So that's for gaming. We can go over a few others. We think decentralized identity is another one. So you can take Vitalik's idea of a soulbound token and turn it into a confidential soulbound token where only the owner of that soulbound token can see the data that is within it, and then they can like permission and grant and slash revoke access to people or smart contracts to view that data. So you can imagine like a situation where you want to take place in, I don't know, maybe a launch pad, right? But that launch pad wants to be regulatory compliant. So there's certain countries that it doesn't want it doesn't want the buyers to be able to buy from, and maybe it wants to also know that you're above some certain age. You could essentially create a soulbound token that is confidential in nature, where like the KYC AML information is stored in that soulbound token, and then basically when you want to gain access to that launchpad, a request is sent to you, where then you accept some level of confidential compute to be done. The compute is done where it says like, is this person above the age of 18? Is he a member of this, or is he a resident of this country and not a resident of these countries? If yes, a one is sent over. If no, a zero is sent over, and it's just expressed in what's known as a Boolean expression. So basically, like yes or no, binary, like yes or no. And again, like confidentiality is maintained the whole way through because they don't actually see how old you are. They don't actually see what country you live in. They just know I got access. This person got access or didn't get access. So that's like another area of confidential compute. Other areas, NFT auctions or just auctions in general. If you have transparent networks, that means that it's like impossible to create what are known as sealed bid auctions. Basically, you can see every other person's bids, and this creates, basically the only way you can do it is like Dutch auctions or these eBay style auctions where everyone sort of like tries to undercut each other at the last second because everyone can see all the information. Which like for certain auction types that's fine. eBay is very successful, but there's lots of other auction types, like second second price sealed bid auctions and Vickery Groves auctions and things like that, which are used every day in the traditional world. And those sort of auction mechanisms are not possible in Web3 today because we don't have the ability to have like confidential bids. And so yeah, I hopefully at this point you guys are getting the sort of theme of today, which is just like make more sophisticated smart contracts with better user experiences. And that's what I really think, Sapphire brings to all of these different use cases.
Yeah, the value prop of Sapphire is quite clear, at least to me, and you've broken down why confidentiality is so important. I can see instances where confidentiality can be used for malicious reasons, and I'm wondering if you guys are worried at any point that you would come under scrutiny by entities like the SEC.
So I think our position, and I'm just speaking for myself. I can't speak for all of Oasis on this, but I think our position is that we're open network, and so where anything can be built on any piece of technology. What we can control is like what our messaging is, what our documents are for, and what we sort of envision to be built, and what we actually think that it can be used for malicious reasons, right? But also it can also be fundamental to enabling regulation. So like the KYC AML thing that I explained before is like a way to use it for like a regulated DeFi. It's still permissionless, but also like, regulatory compliant. And in fact, like if you ever want DeFi or finance on blockchains to be like competitive and accepted as traditional world, like the most governments around the world have like confidentiality requirements within their financial systems. Like you can't leak certain types of data, and so Sapphire actually enables that. So while confidentiality is like potentially used for harm, it's also used for a lot of good reasons as well. And so we try to focus our messaging as well as demos, documents, and all that on how to build these things to bring Web3 further versus like with the malicious reasons.
I'm looking at DeFi Llama. Is there any way to separate the TVL from Emerald and Sapphire, or is it all kind of pulled together under the Oasis umbrella?
Oh, so yeah, Sapphire actually probably has like no TVL right now. So we just launched. We had a soft launch on Mainnet roughly like 2 months ago, and we're still building out a few pieces of infrastructure. Of course, people can start building today, but we haven't done a lot in the ecosystem yet. So it's like early days. Hopefully, you'll see some applications in the next month or so, and that TVL will start growing from there. So right now, actually, everything on DeFi Llama is Emerald.
So is it as easy to build on Emerald, or excuse me, is it as easy to build on Sapphire as it would be on Emerald, or as it would be on any EVM compatible chain?
Yeah, so it's like almost 100% EVM compatible. So you can build in Solidity, and your code will just work now. Previously, we had a compatibility library. This is again one of the reasons for the soft launch. We got rid of this compatibility library. It's no longer necessary. So I would say like building a transparent application on Sapphire is you can just copy and paste your code. It's a little bit more challenging when it comes to building privacy enabled applications, but you still get to build in Solidity and all that. It's just that sort of a new skill is necessary where you have to think about all the aspects that go into confidentiality. Like you could hide the state of some smart contract, but because of all the other data you're sending out, you essentially have like what is known as like side channels, or you can aggregate the other data to gain insights into the data that you're hiding. So you have to be a little bit more weary of those type of things. But it's more of an engineering problem than it is like difficult to develop. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no doubt. And can a dApp that's already live on Ethereum, for example, bridge over seamlessly and take advantage of the privacy, kind of the privacy features that you guys offer?
Yeah. Thank you so much for asking about that. That's actually one of our latest products and things that we're most excited to talk about today. So quickly after launching Sapphire, we had this idea where we're like, we don't always like Sapphire is not just useful in creating confidential, to empowering confidentiality for Sapphire native applications, but actually there are like things that we can do to enable other ecosystems to now add confidentiality and confidential compute into their applications on any EVM network. And so we call this the Oasis privacy layer. And basically, the way that would work is that you can leverage cross-chain messaging bridges. So there's a few. There's multi-chain, there's C-Bridge, Layer 0, Axelar. I'm sure there's others that I might have forgotten, but that basically are not token bridges, but bridges that allow you to send messages and then back and forth between chains. And so, yeah, if you leverage these messaging bridges, you can actually offload your confidential compute needs to Sapphire, and then get the results of that confidential compute on the EVM chain of your choice. It's sort of like, I think a lot of products are now talking about like a modular. First, there was the modular approach to blockchains, and now there's like a modular approach to applications. And so that's where we really see Sapphire fitting in for all of Web3, is being like the privacy layer where projects can offload their confidentiality needs without having to migrate their entire application over to Sapphire.
And obviously, the OPL is quite enticing for people to bridge over, and the incentives are there for folks to build. I'm curious to know if you guys are ever planning on offering liquidity incentives like other EVM chains have in the past to attract large amounts of liquidity and thus a broad number of users over to Emerald, or excuse me, over to Sapphire.
Yeah. So I think it's definitely not out of the question. It's something that we've discussed in the past, but I can't give like a concrete answer today. I think when doing anything like that, there's it's a lot of money, and a lot of considerations have to be taken in place. So whether you're in a bear or bull market, as well as like whether the incentivized liquidity strategy still is valuable. I think it definitely was the theme of the last bull market, but with like Terra Luna collapse, as well as like lack of stickiness that occurred after these incentive programs ran out. There's still questions that need to be answered whether the way that it was done in the previous bull market is still the best way to gain access to liquidity, or if there's maybe a more tempered approach. Maybe it's smaller liquidity programs. Maybe it's focusing on time on the network. It really sort of, we have to wait for the ecosystems to come to consensus on these type of things. And so I guess that's my answer today, is that like we're open to all approaches, but we're still feeling out the waters.
Mm-hmm. And Will, is there anything about Sapphire that I haven't asked? I know we kept it pretty high level, and there are a lot of technical nuances and intricacies that happen in the background, but anything we missed at all? I wanted to ask some questions about Emerald as well, if that's okay.
I guess like the one, it's not necessarily about Sapphire, but the Oasis privacy layer. I think the idea of offloading confidential compute. I'd like to just give some examples, if that's okay. So like one of the first examples that we came up with was like confidential DAO voting. And so again, like I choose examples for these. You can imagine that Aave exists on Ethereum, but maybe Aave wants to also enable their governance process to have some aspect of confidentiality involved. I think Stani, the CEO of Aave, is like famously absent from every single governance proposal, and it makes sense. Like he wants to avoid biasing people by being a very prominent figure in the space, and biasing votes in favor of whatever he believes in. But I think if we're saying that the creator of a protocol can't vote on that protocol's governance for bias reasons, that we clearly have like an issue that needs to be solved, right? And so that's like one form of bias. And then the other form of bias that comes from like being able to view like the real-time results of how a DAO is doing. So you can imagine like a scenario where like maybe like 60% of people are in favor of some governance proposal and 40% of people are opposed. But like all the people who are opposed vote first, and none of the people who are in favor vote. And now I look at the governance proposal and I see, you know, that it's overwhelmingly in the opposition side. And I say it's not worth spending my, transaction fees and my time, voting in favor because, it's never going to pass, right? But like, none of us actually know that if we all voted, that we would have actually gotten this proposal to pass. And so that's like a form of bias, and I think that's a part of the reason why there is confidential voting and there isn't real time updates in like presidential elections and most governance processes in the traditional world. So if you want to relieve these biases, what can you do? Well, you can enable confidential voting, but you can't do that on Ethereum. So instead, what you can do is you can create like a governance module on Sapphire, so that when the governance module on Ethereum starts, a message is sent over that says started on Sapphire as well. And then when a user goes to like the governance dashboard, you can click, to submit your vote. It'll switch your MetaMask wallet to Sapphire. You'll sign an encrypted transaction on Sapphire instead of on Ethereum. It'll also give you much lower gas fees in doing so. And then when the vote is over, all those confidential votes will be aggregated, and a message will be sent back to Sapphire to Ethereum saying whether the vote passes or the vote fails. If the vote passes, it'll trigger the transactions, the changes to be made on Ethereum. So that's like a bit how the Opal will work for confidential voting. You can see. And then one of the other ideas is that you can also even abstract away Sapphire more to create better user experiences by using gas relayers. So if you connect this actually to a gas relayer, you can probably create a way where you can say you can pay in a gas token of Ethereum, and therefore users never even have to get the gas token for Sapphire. And from their perspective, they probably don't even know that they're using Sapphire at any point, other than MetaMask tells them to switch for 1 second. So yeah, that's what we mean by more sophistication and better user experiences. And so also, like, I gave gaming examples earlier, but you can imagine examples where 90% of your game exists on Polygon or Binance Smart Chain, and only when you need confidentiality in your game do you move to Sapphire. Secret ballots, same thing. Not secret ballots, confidential NFT auctions, same idea. You can imagine a scenario where your auction aspect happens on Sapphire, but the NFT is actually like minted and transacted on the other network. And so there's all these different examples where you can use Oasis privacy layer to offload confidential compute in like a way that users don't even know they're interacting with it, but enables basically Web3 to move forward into the next 1,000 different use cases that are possible.
Okay, so and to sum it up, OPL allows you to supplement other EVM compatible chains when needed, but keep most of your information and activity on that respective chain.
Yep, that's exactly what it does. So it allows, I was going to say it again, but you said it perfectly. So yes, exactly.
Beautiful. I mean, look, I had not heard of Oasis Network until Meredith reached out, and I'm glad that we got you guys on. This has been a great show so far. I'm curious to know, and maybe I've been living under a rock, but I talk to so many projects every day. I was surprised I hadn't heard of you guys. I'm curious to know what some strategies you're using to market yourselves, to generate exposure, to create awareness, and say, hey, we're the solution that's out there. And people that, and projects and protocols that might not even know they could use us, and how are you guys spreading the word?
Yeah, so I mean that's a great question. I think behind any successful product there's also like a marketing team. Every component, engineering, community, marketing, and business development are all like vital to the success. So for what we're doing for Sapphire, well, first, as I mentioned, we sort of did a soft launch, so we're just gearing up sort of our marketing efforts and these things now. But so in the next few weeks, I think people will see what we have in store. First, we'll be going to ETH Denver. We have 3 different events going on at ETH Denver. We have a developer networking breakfast. We also are involved in the Universal Privacy Alliance mini summit, and then we are also having a demo workshop on how developers can start building on Sapphire. So anyone who's interested in attending any of these events at ETH Denver, please go into our Discord or go on our Twitter. All the links should be there, and register, please, because we're excited to see you. So that's one step. We're going hard at East Denver, and harder than we've ever gone at any other conference before. We'll also be at Consensus in a couple months too. I don't think we've released what we're doing there yet, but should be similarly going big there. We'll also most likely, well, not most likely, we will be having a hackathon in the upcoming weeks, and people should stay tuned to the developments there, so that we get to start seeing what sort of applications developers want to build on Sapphire, as well as get like feedback from them on feature requests, usability, and this stuff, so we can really start fine-tuning Sapphire to be the best environment for developers to start building on. On the BD end, reaching out to products every day, specifically on ones that we see could have uses in confidentiality. So like I gave a confidential DAO voting example. That basically means that any DAO is now like fair game. So reach out to all the DAOs, gaming projects that either have like battling, puzzles, or riddles. Maybe they would benefit from incorporating fog of war, these type of things. So it's like really a multi-phase approach where every part of our team is working towards it, and then even the distinction of creating the Oasis privacy layer, I think, is part of our marketing strategy, right? Because if we did just the Sapphire native launch, that would mean that we would have to encourage much larger native builds where products have to build out entire ecosystems and entire projects, whereas the Oasis privacy layer approach allows us to say, hey, we're just going to allow you to build this really small module on Sapphire in order to incorporate confidentiality, but you don't have to migrate your whole project. And so this allows us to bootstrap network effects, start building relationships with other teams, and just get things rolling in a lot quicker. And so that's a bit into our that's a few insights into our approach. There's probably a million other things I could talk about, but that's what we're doing right now.
Take a deep breath, Will. I mean, that was a lot, guys. We have over 500 people in here. If you have a moment, give Will a follow. He's done a fantastic job showcasing Oasis Network. Give the Oasis account a follow, and give everyone up here a follow. We really appreciate it. Will, I know that we wanted to focus on Sapphire for the majority of the space, but I did want to touch upon Emerald just a little bit. Can we take a step back? You said that Emerald is 100% EVM compatible and 99% cheaper gas fees. What are the distinguishing features of Emerald apart from that, right? Because I feel like at this point we have so many layer 2s and side chains and EVM compatible chains that are 99% cheaper and fast. And I'm curious to know, one, what as I mentioned, what are the distinguishing features of Emerald and how Emerald approaches the blockchain trilemma?
Yeah. So I think when you get into these questions about cheap and fast EVM chains, there's often a lot of other untalked about ideas. So there's the security and decentralization of the network. So if you have 7 validators and you're sort of like a side chain, that's not equal to, let's say, something that is a cheap, fast EVM chain that has like 100 validators, and is adequately decentralized. So in terms of Emerald, the advantage that we see there is that we can have this scalability while remaining like very decentralized, because we have this modular approach where the Emerald network submits proofs to our underlying consensus layer, which has 120 validators and millions upon millions of rows staked there. And so it inherits the decentralization from the consensus layer, and it remains very decentralized. And then one of the other features that probably doesn't get talked about a lot, maybe the Avalanche community does a bit, but outside of that is finality. So Emerald actually has instant finality, which is pretty rare in the Web3 world, and it's a product of having our consensus based off of a modified version of Tendermint. But So what is instant finality? Well, the best way I can describe it is that if you send tokens to a centralized exchange, um, like normally like there's a pending period, right? And it can be like 20, 30 minutes sometimes for like something like Ethereum, right? And what's the reason for that? The reason is that like just because the transaction has been incorporated in one block doesn't mean that the blockchain won't get reorged. And so, these blockchains have finality times, and then centralized exchanges essentially, have to incorporate these finality times into their accepting protocols and stuff like that. And so what you actually find is that like when you send rows to a centralized exchange, it'll be like when the transaction is confirmed on the blockchain, it'll be in your wallet, within a couple of seconds. And that's all due to instant finality. And so if you want to create payment systems that are efficient, if you want to create applications that are comparable to like the real world finance, then you really need instant finality and instant settlement. And so that's another feature that probably doesn't get talked about enough in the Web3 space, maybe just because we're not there yet. And there's so many other larger problems that finality times are not big yet. But that's another feature of Emerald. And then I think like, similar to this is like a long roadmap idea, but similar to like the Polkadot approach, where like all parent chains on Polkadot are sort of interconnected by their relay chain. At some point, all parent times on Oasis will be able to use cross-chain communication through our consensus layer, and so will be like massive for interoperability. And so these are some features of Emerald that are maybe not available on other EVM chains that are touting similar throughput and similar gas fees.
And I suppose last question before I pass the mic to some audience members. What are some safe ways to bridge over to the Oasis network? Have you guys built your own proprietary bridge, or the third-party bridges that you guys are working with to make it a seamless and safe process?
Yeah, so bridging right now in Web3 is like a massive mess, and I'm hoping that like that becomes like one of the large quality of life improvements that come in the next bull run. We haven't built our own bridge, but we have on Emerald we have 3 bridges integrated. We have multi-chain, we have wormhole, and we have C-bridge. I would encourage people to use those bridges, as they're collaborators and they're generally very reputable. But at the same time, any bridge is possible to be hacked. And I think almost every bridge at this point has been hacked. So be careful with your funds and use the bridge that you feel is safest for you and your funds. So that's to get to Emerald. In terms of getting rows to any of our networks, we have sort of a native way to get from consensus to any paradigm that you'd like in our Oasis native wallet. So you can essentially withdraw from any centralized exchange, and then from there, use our inter-paradigm bridge to send rows to any network. Sapphire, this is like one of the big pieces of infrastructure that we're trying to get up and running, which is why, again, like I said, soft launch like it's on mainnet, but like it's sort of a soft launch and there's not really TVL yet, is because we're still working with bridges, both messaging bridges and token bridges, in order to get all that infrastructure ready.
Right
so
on.
Short answer, wormhole, C-bridge, and multi-chain for Emerald.
Right on. Hey, look, Will, it's been a great show so far. Do you have any other, is there anything that I haven't asked that you would like to share with us before I pass the mic to some audience members?
No, thank you so much for the great questions. I think you've given like a great opportunity for me to speak about Oasis, Sapphire, the Oasis Privacy Layer, and Emerald. I guess I would just encourage people to check out our Discord, join, and follow us on Twitter so they can stay updated on all this information. We put out a lot of content so that because we do understand that everything that we talk about is fairly technical, so we try to put out a lot of content to break it down and make it simpler. And if you have any questions, please join any of our socials so that you can get some answers.
Are you guys gonna eventually release a ruby and a diamond?
I think we Sapphire and Opal was the two that we're focused on right now. No plans yet for the next paradigm, but you never know. That's another great feature about Oasis is that we can support so many different paradigms on our consensus layer because we don't have the smart contract capabilities. So we can handle, I think, roughly like 1,000 different paradigms, which would be like holding 1,000 different rollups. So it's very easy, I guess, to spin up new paradigms. So who knows if Cairo becomes very popular as a programming language. Move becomes very popular. There might be new paradigms in the future.
Hey, well, we mentioned and brushed over paradigms in the beginning, but we didn't really dive too deep into what they are. Do you mind giving just a quick overview of paradigm and how it works and how it fits into this whole puzzle?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like I said before, paradigms are very similar to rollups, unfortunately, or like layer twos. But unfortunately, like when we came up with the name parallel runtimes and paradigms, we were sort of ahead of our time, and the idea of rollups and layer twos didn't really exist yet. So, pretty analogous there. The difference would be the type of proofs they use. So, optimistic rollups use I can't remember the name, but they use proofs that essentially require them to they have like 1 week finality times. So we were talking about finality earlier, but like on an optimistic rollup, because they optimistically are validating things, they can't allow instant withdrawals, and so that's fine as long as you stay on the network. But as soon as you have to leave the network, you have to wait 1 week if you want to do it like the correct way, or there's bridging services that'll let you bridge out, but they're pretty high fees, 2%, something along those lines. And realistically, like if there is ever a problem with an optimistic rollup, these bridges will get taken because those 2% fees are not enough to add up to like what the actual risk that an exploit holds for them. I guess I think that most likely what they're doing is betting on the fact that there is low risk, and I'm not smart enough to know whether that risk is high or low. But yeah, so that's like an optimistic rollup. And then ZK rollups obviously use zero knowledge. They have pretty quick finality as well, but they have some issues with creating like EVM compatibility. So those are like the two rollup approaches that are most popular right now. Paratimes use a different kind of proof called a bare metal proof. The advantages of bare metal proof is like one, the instant finality, and then it's also relatively cheap. The throughput doesn't quite get as high as optimistic and validity, but it gets instant finality and it gets fairly cheap. I guess like paratimes have a couple hundred transactions per second right now. And then the other thing is that, and this is probably like too technical for me to talk about, but the amount of data that they have to compress is also much smaller. And so there's less of a strain on the data availability layer, which I think is like, one of the large things that is having to be changed on Ethereum right now because as they have these rollups start spinning up, the amount of data that's available is getting fairly scarce. So yeah, again, probably a pretty technical answer, but I guess simple explanation, very similar to rollups with just different optimizations and priorities picked.
You guys are ahead of your time. To sum it up, let's let's go with Aisha real quick. She's got some questions, and then I'll pass it to Nerdhead afterwards.
Awesome. Hi, Aisha.
Hey, how are you?
Doing well. How about you?
I'm good, thank you. You mentioned about Oasis privacy layer, that popular DApps on all EVM chains can utilize Oasis privacy technology without having to migrate their entire application and user base to a different chain. It got me thinking, can already existing Web2 applications also leverage privacy capabilities that Oasis privacy layer is offering?
Yeah. Uh, hmm. I guess this has like not been a focus or something that I've really thought about too much. Um, but yeah, I actually I do one of my theses for Web 2 and Web 3 is that Web 2 will migrate to like a Web 2.5 and become sort of hybrid. And so yeah, I think that it's possible that you see applications that exist in Web2 start using decentralized confidentiality or decentralized smart contract execution for some aspects of their protocol. So yeah, that's definitely possible. I think it's not necessarily our focus right now. It's probably going to take a while, but that's definitely a potential use case in the future.
Understood. And I have read in a blog section that confidential data associated with NFTs is securely stored in the Oasis parcel paradigm and can be accessed by individuals who possess a link token on the Emerald EVM compatible paradigm. I would like to inquire about the maximum size of data that can be stored on a confidential NFT and how the owner can manage permissions related to private data to allow them to determine which parts of the data can be accessed by others.
Yeah, so the answer to that in terms of approach, like how it can be done, there's like tons of different ways that it can be done. So like one approach could be that well, I guess all of the data, most of the data is getting stored off chain for most use cases. So you can imagine that you have like some, I'm going to go with the Sapphire approach right for right now. But so you could have Sapphire Key Manager basically manage access to encrypted keys, so that like at first only you have access to this encryption key, and that encryption key can essentially decrypt files stored in, let's say, like IPFS or some other, or even like Google's confidential VMs, or some other off-chain confidential data storage. And so you alone have the encryption key associated with that data file. And then what you can do is essentially permissionless or like manage access, grant and revoke access to that encryption key to other wallet addresses or smart contracts or something along those lines. And when I say like grant access, like you won't actually be able to see the encryption key, but you'll be able to make use of it. This is like a high level overview. I don't have too much I guess engineering experience with confidential NFTs, but if you have further questions, if this is not a sufficient answer for you, please join our Discord and ask some more there, because we love talking about confidential NFTs, because I think right now the use cases are not well understood, but in the future they'll be crucial to creating confidential soulbound tokens, and then as well as like confidential data DAOs, so like where you can essentially own your data, own your social data, your genetic data, your healthcare data, whatever it is, and potentially gain profit from it in the future. So yeah, they're going to, I think, going to be an exciting use case for the future.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you so much for answering.
Oh, and I should point out that like the Sapphire version of confidential NFTs, we should have documents on how to do it. How like at least like one way to build a confidential NFT on Sapphire in the next few weeks to a month. So that documentation will be available.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Hey, Nerdhead, go for it, man. Thank you, Aisha.
Thank you. So I really first time hearing these Oasis, and I just digging enough. So my question is, it's like Ethereum, right? Whatever in Ethereum, smart contracts, everything is on Solana, so you can develop in Oasis also. It's is it any fundamental differences? First, and I can see you can add as in the MetaMask the network, and it's like working like Binance, like Ethereum, or the other these like networks, right? And do you have like suggested NFT marketplace right now that support Oasis network, and any plans to add I mean collaborate to the OpenSea this network? And last question is, do you have like swap networks, quick swap or pank swap, apps that work in Oasis network?
Yeah, so there's a few questions there. Let me unpack them all. So in terms of EVM compatibility, yeah, developing is just developing in Solidity. Everything that's possible to build on any other EVM can be built in the same way on both Emerald and Sapphire. The key difference is that on Sapphire there's also increased flexibility and customizations that can be made involving confidentiality. So it's sort of like EVM plus. You get the normal EVM plus the ability to have encrypted aspects of state for your smart contracts. But like as you mentioned, MetaMask, anything that is EVM compatible will be compatible with Sapphire and Emerald. The next question was, I think, about NFT marketplaces. So again, Sapphire in a soft launch. We don't really have any marketplaces available yet. Applications are still building right now. So hopefully that you'll see a lot of those applications going live in the next few weeks to months. But on Emerald we do have MetaMirror, which I think was the first NFT marketplace to be launched on Emerald, and it actually has support for these ideas of confidential NFTs, as well as like a launch pad and all that stuff. So if you're a creator and want to start creating NFTs and being involved in the Oasis ecosystem, that's a great place to start. And then we're also integrated into some of these larger NFT marketplaces. The names escape me right now, but yeah, if you go to our ecosystem page, I'm sure that you can find all that information that you're looking for in regards to that. And then the last question was around like dexes and swaps and stuff like that. Again, Sapphire is in soft launch, so nothing to speak of yet, but hopefully soon. There are a couple dexes looking at Sapphire and doing their like initial planning stages and seeing how they can also incorporate like some of these ideas we talked about earlier, like MEV resistance and confidentiality into the dexes. So that's for Sapphire, and then on Emerald, we have Yuzu Swap, which is probably the dex with like the most amount of liquidity. It has like a sort of different fee mechanism and I guess like reward mechanism than other protocols that they call like trade mining and stuff like that. So I recommend people go and check that out. And if you're looking for a dex that is more similar to a quick swap or a pancake swap or any of these things that exist on other networks, we also have a dex called Lizard Exchange, and those are probably the two largest dexes on Emerald right now.
Oh, thank you very much. My last question also, do you have any promotion or campaign that to like projects to want to build on the Oasis network?
Yeah, so we have a grant program. So products that are looking to build on the Oasis network can apply to our grant program, pitch their idea, and hopefully get a grant. I will say that a lot of our grants right now are focused on KPI driven aspects and metrics. So it is like very much focused on how many users you can attract and the sort of transactions that come to the network. But it's definitely like an avenue people can go down. And then we also have our ecosystem fund. Our ecosystem fund sort of operates as an investment arm where 19 of the largest VCs that have backed Oasis, as well as the Oasis Foundation itself, will invest in projects as they go through their larger raises. So typically how projects go through this process is they apply for a grant. They hit some KPI metrics. They, get sort of traction and prove out their use case, prove out their proof of concept, and then apply to the ecosystem fund so that they can get the funding needed to scale that project further. And then I guess the third and final way to like get rewarded for building and being involved in the ecosystem is our hackathons. Like I said earlier, we should have a hackathon coming out in the next few weeks about Sapphire and Opal. And yeah, I encourage any developers to play around and hopefully win some rewards for those efforts.
Hey, thanks, Nerdhead. Let's go with Venice next.
Okay, thank you, Noah. So here's my question. I want to know that what are some of the challenges and limitations associated with implementing responsible AI? And can you provide examples of some real-world use cases where the Oasis protocol could have been used to promote responsible AI?
Yeah. So responsible AI, like I know we didn't talk much about AI, but it is like partially like it not partially it is like also a large component to Oasis and what confidential smart contracts can achieve. The idea behind responsible AI is essentially that AI, is basically as valuable as the amount and quality of data that it consumes. If you can design the best algorithm in the world, but if you don't have access to data, it's not going to have the ability to learn off of that data and then create like accurate models. So one of the key challenges to that is how do you access data while also preserving privacy, right? So you can imagine like there's like millions of use cases in healthcare where like you want access to these rare conditions or a large cohort of people, but also at the same time those people's genetic data is one very valuable and very personal to them. There's tons of movies based off like dystopias, but based off the idea of like genomic biases and stuff like that. So you want to avoid any of those sort of outcomes. So how do you sort of achieve this? Well, one way that you can achieve this is through using privacy preserving computation techniques, like differential privacy, federated learning, these sort of things. But it's important to preserve people's privacy in this. And so one of the things that's possible with Sapphire that's, or on Oasis that's, a little bit more challenging or not, or maybe even impossible on other networks is the idea of managing the access controls to people's data for these AI models. So in the same way we were talking about like, confidential NFTs, you can create confidential data storage. You can create confidential NFTs of like your personal genomic data or your financial data or anything that someone might find valuable, and then grant access to that data for a specific period of time and for like a specific price or something along those lines. And yeah, they basically rent it out so that it can be used in these AI models, but privacy is preserved the whole way through. And so that's like really one of our visions is empowering artificial intelligence and machine learning, while also making it responsible and not allowing these like dystopian narratives to ever come to fruition by doing so. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, that completely answers my question, and thank you so much for answering.
No problem.
Thanks, Venice. Rahmat, you're next, sir, and then we'll wrap things up.
Yeah, thank you, Noah. I have just one question. So, I have read somewhere that Oasis network sophisticated discrepancy detection makes Oasis more efficient than sharding and the parachains, requiring a small replication factor for the small level of the security. So, I want to understand that what is this discrepancy detection and how is it more efficient than sharding and the parachains?
So yeah, I can give like a high level overview here. But I'm not like an engineer, so they probably better to ask one of them. But my understanding is that basically the efficiency with discrepancy detection is the ability to completely remove consensus from execution in a very modular like way. So like essentially our paratimes don't have to do any execution at all. Sorry, our paratimes don't have to do any consensus at all. They just have to do the compute. And basically, there's a rotation through the validators to see if there's there's any discrepancies between them. And then if there is discrepancies between them, only at that point does then the consensus layer, go through those discrepancies and actually sort out what's happening. And so basically, if all execution is, comes to the same outcome, then, everything is fine, and basically nothing has to be submitted to the consensus layer. And then, if there is a discrepancy, then sort of the formal proof has to be done. But that's done. It's sort of, I guess, similar to optimistic rollups in that way. But again, doesn't have the 1 week finality. And the other advantage is like the data compression. So because you use this approach, less data actually has to be sent to the consensus chain, and therefore, you don't run into data availability problems. So that's like my high level understanding. Again, not an engineer, so for like a more formal explanation, and then you should probably join our Discord and ask there.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for explaining. Over to you, Noah.
No problem.
Hey, well, you guys published a pretty cool article. It's called The Future of AI with Oasis. And I think it'd be really interesting to dive into that at some point in the future. I know that we weren't planning on it being the focal point of this AMA, so I'll leave it for another broadcast. But I do think it's very interesting to learn more about how Oasis Network is integrating AI and how the Oasis team sees AI reshaping the way that human beings interface with life. So yeah, would love to extend that invitation, and you guys can cash it in anytime in the future. But also want to thank you so much for coming on today. I think your story is an inspiration, being a community member and then ultimately being a vital member of the team, coming on these Twitter spaces and articulating the power of Oasis Network so brilliantly. So we thank you again for coming on and wish you the best of luck going into the future. If you have any final words for our community members, go ahead and share them now.
Yeah, I'd just like to say thank you so much, Noah, for having me. Thank you for your kind words. It's an honor, and still sort of feels surreal that I'm here and that this is the future that we're all moving towards. Just want to say thank you to everyone for showing up, for listening to Oasis. I hope that you guys have learned something today. And if you guys have any questions, please don't hesitate to join any of our socials. Reach out to me, reach out to our engineers, any of our amazing community team members, ambassadors. We have a ton of people who are available to help educate on the Oasis network and help answer your questions. So I hope to see you guys join our community soon, and hope maybe see you at ETH Denver and at one of our hackathons in the future. And yeah, thank you, Noah, for I guess the invitation to talk about AI. Yeah, I would love to do that a bit more. There's sort of a lot going on with Oasis, so I think we went through a lot today, but there's still more to go over, and hopefully I'll be on soon to talk about that.
Looking forward to it, Will. Whale Coin Talk community, thank you for joining. We have an AMA with Arbitrum coming up in less than an hour, so don't go anywhere. But remember, everything you hear on these broadcasts is meant for educational purposes only. Nothing is financial advice. So be safe out there, and we'll see you again in about 50 minutes. Take care.
Have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye.